Welcome to Bonn Park. I'm Sara Geidlinger.
And I'm Marshall Ward.
And today we have Laura Gillians.
Laura is a playground designer.
And it's super cool. That's a great job, but also it's a great connection because Marshall and I met at a playground at Bonn Park.
Yeah, we sure did. This is a really fun and fascinating conversation as we talk about the kind of structure she designs today and also designs of the past.
Laura has a degree in psychology, and I think that she really dives deep into how that builds her day, which is building playgrounds.
Yeah, this was very eye-opening to me when it comes to accessibility for all kids.
Let's get into it and have some fun. Here's Laura.
Welcome to Bonn Park.
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 Do you enjoy Bonn Park podcast?
If so, we would really appreciate it if you
Leave a review,
like, rate, subscribe, but most importantly,
share directly from the platforms
with your family and friends. That's the best way to get the word out to everybody, and more people will get to see our show that way. So click those like buttons and share our show. Thank you.
Thanks.
On with the show. This is it. We are supported by Tiffin Day ready-to-eat curry stews. Tiffin Day vegan stews are delicious, nutritious, and so convenient. You literally just heat and eat because the Tiffin Day crew has already put tons of TLC into every meal. Tiffin Day stews are perfect for quick lunches or for those nights when you just don't feel like cooking. Every stew contains super healthy vegetable pulses, which are high in protein and fiber. Tiffin Day's chickpea and tomato stew is a bestseller, and for good reason. Caramelized onions and spices like cinnamon and garlic make the flavor pop. And then there's the wonderful kidney bean and rhubarb curry, made in small batches with tangy Ontario-grown rhubarb. Find Tiffin Day stews at Vincenzo's in Waterloo, Top Market Family Farm Store in Cambridge, and Rowe Farms in Guelph. Check out their delicious offerings at tiffinday.com or follow them on Instagram and Facebook. Stop stewing about it and try their amazing food. We are supported by Soy Sauce. The slogan on soysauce.ca says it all. They're very hot, but they're very tasty. We should probably apologize. Award-winning hot sauce maestro Eric Begg figured he'd get his apologies out of the way immediately. If the upper limit of your spice tolerance is Tabasco, well, sorry, these sauces aren't for you. These handmade concoctions pack the wallop of peppers like the Boot Jolokia and Trinidad Scorpion. But along with all that heat come vibrant flavors of ingredients picked fresh from Eric's yard, nicknamed the Garden of Apologies. If you're a lover of all things spicy, you'll be sorry if you don't try this stuff. Find Soy Sauce at the Drayton Chop House, the Cheesy Corner in Stainer, and check out their whole fiery line at soysauce.ca. Fun fact, Canada makes over 85% of the world's mustard seeds. That makes mustard Canada's condiment. And guess what? Bonn Park is supported by Kaplansky's Deli Mustard. I love mustard. With 5 amazing flavors to choose from, Kaplansky's Deli Mustard adds amazing flavor to any meal. Kaplansky's classic ballpark mustard tastes like a warm summer day, and their zippy horseradish will warm you up on a cold one. Kaplansky's spicy deli mustard has plenty of flavor to back up the fire, and the mild has a mellower but rich flavor, and the apple Dijon is pork's best friend. Kaplansky's Deli Mustard can be found at Vincenzo's and Charles Quality Meats in Waterloo, Valerio's Market in Guelph, as well as Frobert's and Fergie's Fine Foods in Fergus. Visit Kaplanskys.com and get a signature variety pack delivered right to your door. Follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Eat more mustard and celebrate Canada's condiments. Bonn Park is supported by Salenzi Foods, a Canadian brand with an Italian heart. Salenzi Foods' gourmet products include artisan gluten-free pastas, antipastos like sun-dried tomatoes and smoky grilled artichokes, and ready-to-heat and serve organic sauces. It's amazing how much flavor is packed into Solenzi products, given how much their products do not have. No GMOs, no gluten, no soy, no eggs, no additives, and no compromise on taste. The Solenzi secret is a dedication to fresh, healthy ingredients prepared with Italian traditional care. No time to cook? No problem. Solenzi's delicious offerings can be combined to make quick, nutritious meals in less than 30 minutes. So whether you're unwinding after a busy day or preparing a feast for your family, you can count on Solenzi quality. Check out solenzi.com and find their fine foods locally at Sobeys, Farm Boy, and Charles Quality Meats.
Laura Gillians, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to know how you and Marshall met.
Yeah, so I'm the president at the KW Bilingual School and was a parent there for 14 years. And I met Laura maybe, I guess 2 years ago now, when we were redesigning our entire playground in the back. And she came because she's a specialist in the playground structures, which I found to be the most fun part and exciting part. And the joy it has brought the kids ever since. And I can't believe this is a job. I'd love to hear about how you get into and find a job like this. I didn't even know that was a career.
Neither did I, truthfully, Marshall. You grow up thinking you're going to be a teacher or a nurse or all these very distinct jobs. And I fell into this job, very fortunately.
So how did that fall happen?
So I worked in corporate for 10 years. And at the end of my corporate career, I moved over to a family-run business, a local business here in Kitchener-Waterloo. And I was heading up their retail division, had my babies. And during that time, the person that was running playgrounds for that company ended up leaving. And while I was on maternity leave, I was asked to come back early to manage the entire division. So I all of a sudden was in this world that I didn't quite know about. I knew retail, but definitely didn't know all the rules and regulations that went along with playgrounds. So I was there for 2 years, and then the company actually decided to downsize and not carry recreation equipment any longer. Went over to another manufacturer of US, actually the largest manufacturer of playgrounds in the world. Was there for another 2 years. And at that time, I realized I had gained enough information to be able to go out on my own. So I started my own business and became a distributor rep for a Canadian-run company, which is Blue Imp, which is the product that went into KW Bilingual.
That playground is amazing. It's something special.
Yeah, I remember when the principal, Mona Balia, brought this calendar in, this big, not a calendar, a catalog, I guess. Big, bright, shiny, beautiful catalog. And the options were incredible. And it made me reflect on the playgrounds that I remember as a kid.
Yeah.
And so what are
burning yourself on a slide?
or what are your earliest memories of childhood playgrounds you would have seen, Laura?
My biggest memory is the one where my parents live, which is in Bayfield, a tiny little community up on Lake Huron. And it was old and rickety, and we just were inventive in our play. So we would hurt ourselves on the teeter-totters and keep on going. Again, it was all steel, and it was you'd have to watch yourself to not hurt yourself, but it was all adventurous play, right? And then we got into an era where it was boring play. So, you had a slide and a climber, and it was very, very structured. And that came into effect when the rules got put into place, and that was to protect kids, but they went very far, right? And now they've loosened up those rules, and now we're seeing incredible structures. Like Marshall said, the sky is the limit, and I get to design them, and it's so much fun to be able to put pieces together and make people's dreams come true.
So when rules started changing, what are we talking about here? I think about monkey bars and something we had at Belmont Park called the Rocket, which was a big steel rocket.
I love the Rocket.
Yeah, and then the thing that I think most about is, and the thing that I feared as a kid was that thing that's like a circle and you run and you jump on it.
You whip kids off of it.
So that's a perfect example of how the rules changed. So the merry-go-round was very unsafe when we were young. There were no inhibitors on them, and it was exactly it was kind of Darwinism at its best, where the strongest survived. And so they took merry-go-rounds off of the playground equipment list. We weren't allowed to put merry-go-rounds in. Monkey bars are another example where people are very apprehensive about allowing their kids on monkey bars. But now merry-go-rounds are back. They've got speed inhibitors in them, built into them. So we've come a long way in the science of play. And monkey bars are a great example of, it's a very important key piece to have in a playground, because it's the only piece where kids can brachiate, which is the hand over hand motion. And if you do crossover hand over hand, both sides of the brain are working at the same time. And there's nothing else out there where the child activates both sides of the brain.
So let's talk about swings too, because swings have always remained. So fun fact here, I'm going to blow your mind. I was for a short time a registered playground inspector with OPA.
Oh.
So I actually know some of this stuff. So some of the regulations, some of the protective surfacing and the distancing of items and the railing widths. And I had this wonderful kit to measure all these things. A lot of fun. I had so much fun doing that job when I had it. But I remember in the training, which was intensive, the training was very intensive. The notes I took, oh my goodness, that they were talking about, swings break every single rule on our list. Everything that you're training for is broken by swings, but the value of play on swings and the experience outweighs the safety risk. Right. So we're going to just extend the protective surfacing around the area, and you have these big buffers. So these are things that you have to consider when you're constructing your design, when you're coming up with your design for these playgrounds. You can't it's not just a modular Lego thing where you're like, oh, we're going to fit in all these pieces, which are incredibly expensive, worth it, but very expensive. We know playgrounds cost a lot of money, but you've also got to think of this distancing and this surfacing and all these different components. So what all does that entail? And how do you come about that design with your client to get what they need in the space that they have with the budget that they're constrained to?
It is like a bit of a puzzle piece. So basically you have to start with their site size and how much space they have. And obviously they're going to come to the table with a wish list. If swings are in there, they need to know right off the bat how much, first of all, infrastructure goes into that, because it's very easy to look at the above ground costs and say, okay, a swing set is $5,000. Okay, that's affordable, right? Well, now you've got to take all that soil out of there. You've got to put drainage, some kind of drainage underneath it. You've got to put safety surfacing underneath there. So you got to start with the space, then you start adding the wish list, and then you start giving costs, and then you whittle way back from there. Swings are one of those where it's changed as well. You don't go to the main big huge playgrounds any longer and just see a belt seat. You see these inclusive swings, which are incredible, where it's multi-users. And again, like you said, there's so much sensory input that comes and output that comes with swinging, especially with children with disabilities. So it's really important to put that in there. We just came out with a product that is low to the ground and still has that swaying motion.
Oh, cool.
As much safety surfacing. So there's ways around things. If you want to have that same sensory input, we can make it work in a very small location.
I'm remembering one more part of that. So you're talking about the swings and they're being accessible and different types of swings for different needs. So I'm remembering sort of for inclusivity and accessibility, the transition, I'm probably using the wrong words, it's been a while, but the transition platform. So not just a set of stairs or a climber to get up. There has to be something where people of all abilities can get up to these different levels to experience.
That's right. So the AODA rulings came into place quite a few years ago, where you have to have at least access to the playground. Well, that's fine and dandy if a kid can get there, but if there's nothing to do when they get there, there's no point to it, right? So there's something called a transfer station, which allows a child that's in a mobility device to transfer onto the playground. And then from there, the stair depth is actually different for a transfer station, so that a child can scooch themselves up onto the actual playground. Everyone, when they think of inclusivity or accessibility, they think of a ramped structure. Most playgrounds don't have the space for a ramp. or the budget for a ramp. It is very expensive. And what you see in a lot of designs is that they may have ramped the structure, but there's nothing there when they get to the top of the ramp to do, right? So I always try and discourage people from a ramped structure and try and incorporate as much play value on the ground level so that it's inclusive and there's play for all.
And did I read this correctly? Is your post-secondary education in psychology?
It is.
Yeah, and it talked a bit about a focus of autism. What connections can be made between autism and playgrounds?
A lot. So I had a strong focus with Asperger's particularly. So it's on the spectrum, and it's a lot of able-bodied children, but they require a lot of sensory input. So when you're designing a playground, you don't want to just design it for the able-bodied child. You want to have certain considerations. So for example, children with autism can get overstimulated very quickly. So a playground is a very busy, fast-paced play area. You want to make sure that there's a little cozy nook in your playground somewhere so that those children have a place to retreat to. And it's not necessarily just a child with autism. Other children get overstimulated or want that ability to recluse from the playground. But you want to make sure that you have, fidgety type of play pieces so that there's things that they can turn or touch, or making sure that there's a lot of different types of play. So you want to have spinning, you want to have rocking, you want to have that brachiating along with the traditional slides and climbers.
And I think about the bridge that I see at like Waterloo Park, and maybe Victoria Park as well.
Wobbly bridge?
Yeah, the wobbly bridge. That's really neat. I think that's an experience that kids probably never felt before until they step on that bridge, and probably don't in any other part of their life until they. How does the bridge work?
Well, it's very interesting that you bring up a bridge, because a lot of people don't see that as play value, right? They see that as an access point, whereas children most definitely see it as play. Especially if there's some movement with it. I look back at the design for KW Bilingual, and we have a long bridge that kids run back and forth between. And in that bridge, in the case of that bridge, we actually have monkey bars underneath the bridge. So there's added play value there. But the main things that kids love to do on playgrounds is play grounders.
I was just going to mention grounders because when you mentioned the long bridge, I was like, oh, that's for grounders for sure.
For sure. So it's hard to get into the mind of the kids. And I'm blessed that I have 2 young children, and I started designing playgrounds when my youngest one was less than 1 year old. So I have people that are helping design these playgrounds in the background with a kid's perspective. But it's easy to look at a playground from an adult perspective and want it to be aesthetically pleasing and, incorporating things that adults would like, where we have to make sure that we're looking at it from the children's perspective and that they want to play on it and continue to play on it. I say a playground where a kid is bored the first time they're there is a fail.
Laura, has there been talk along the way about just kind of getting rid of swings altogether? I think about how every playground, the swings are kind of where the mischief happens, usually with older kids who have they really should be doing something else. And what they're doing is they're whipping the swing around over and over. And it's hard on the equipment, and it takes away from the fun for the next parent that comes along. Has there ever been talk about just getting rid of swings?
It depends on what area you're in. So, for example, the Waterloo Region District School Board disallows swings completely. I don't think it's necessarily from the mischief point of view, but if you think of a schoolyard, that's a place where a lot of bullying actually happens, because you can see one kid running out at the beginning of recess and having that swing for the entire time. So you don't want to have too many pieces where it's a one user piece of equipment. But there's other areas where, out in rural Ontario, they want lots of swings. So they will put in 6 bays of swings so that there's enough swings for all the children. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think that swinging motion, there's nothing else out there that gives you that feeling of flying.
I still do it when I go to the park with my kids, or if we're babysitting someone, pre-COVID, I'll get on that swing myself. It's joyful.
It is. Yeah. And especially when you can get one that actually fits an adult, because a lot of them don't. But yeah, there's no other feeling out there. And again, when we talk about sensory input, children on the spectrum really love to swing. In fact, one of the biggest requests for residential that I get are swings. So people want them for their older child that has a disability, and they don't want a Costco swing set. They need something that is heftier, that can hold a full-size person.
And the first time I experienced the soft ground, the artificial, I don't know what you call it.
Rubberized surfacing?
Yeah, rubberized surfacing. Where did that come from? So I remember the first time I stepped on it at Victoria Park and I was like, what is this? And this is incredible. Why wasn't this around when my girls were little? Where did that come from?
Well, it came from AODA and the requirements for access. So the only two types of surfacing that are accessible are wood mulch and rubberized surfacing. And you can imagine that if you're in a wheelchair, wood mulch isn't that accessible. So if you are a 5-year-old and you're trying to get to the playground and actually maneuvering yourself, it's very, very challenging. Whereas a rubber surfacing is always consistent, it's always safe. So it came from access. Unfortunately, it is still very cost prohibitive. So not a lot of places can afford it. If we could, we put it in every single playground because there's play value even in the surfacing, right? We have to still have an option that makes it affordable.
I think I thought the motivation behind that surface would have been safety and the fact that a kid can take quite a fall on it. And it's completely not like pavement at all.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, all the surfacing are tested the same. And Sarah, you'd be able to speak to this.
I do.
So there is a machine that is used and something is actually dropped onto it and then it's registered. And so we have to put in a lot of wood mulch to register the same fall height as we would rubber. So yes, rubber is safe, but not necessarily safer because all the surfacing has to measure the same when we do the drop test.
I read this incredible book years back. I'm going to say 15, 20 years ago. And of course, I can't remember the title, but it was something like Playgrounds of the World, Playgrounds All Around the World. Maybe you're familiar with it. And it was talking about, there were photographs and it was talking about how different countries approach play. And there was some wild stuff in like Germany, where like in the early 80s, there'd be like kind of a junkyard site, piping, boards with nails in them, all the things that you want to keep your children away from piled up together for these kids to play with. And there were these neighborhood areas where kids would play with this stuff on purpose. It wasn't an accident. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Absolutely. That is definitely coming back
No way.
in Europe. So I can't ever foresee us having that type of play here. We're just too litigious, right? That people are put their kids in a bubble and we're a little more apt to worry about Jimmy, right? But no, those are definitely very popular in Eastern Europe countries. But I don't foresee it coming here. What is a big trend over the last 10 years here is natural play. And there's lots of examples in our community of natural play. And it's been an excellent addition to the composite structures. And again, I don't see it as an asset in every single park. But again, KW Bilingual is a great example where that's been incorporated for the daycare, where we have very young, inquisitive minds that need those different types of textures and different type of play. The only thing that happens is, by the time they're 6, 7, 8, they're not necessarily making mud pies any longer. They need the physical outlet, right? So there's definitely a time and place for that type of play.
And let's talk about slides. There's a couple I don't see anymore. One is like Hurley's Market took away this green slide that had like wicked bumps on it. Like you'd go down and you'd be like, ow, that hurts, right? But also Victoria Park had what must have been like a 20-foot slide. Like
that was a great slide.
Making a twirling motion.
Is it gone?
Yeah, I think so. And the little kids would whip down it kind of thing. Are those not around?
That one's still there. So Victoria Park redid their entire playground, but they kept that slide. Yeah. So that is still there. There's been a lot of research that's gone into slides too. So Sarah mentioned about steel slides and how when we were young, we were burning ourselves on them, and there was always those fears. Well, I encourage steel slides because there's a lot of science behind how surfaces heat up. And if something's in direct sun, it's still going to heat up to the same temperature. So you'll have plastic and steel. Eventually, they'll still reach the same temperature. But what we now know is you don't face them south or you don't face them west. So it's all about designing to make sure that you've got everything located where it needs to be. The speed of the slide is very important so that they are safe. So again, there's a lot of research that's gone into it, and it's just been tweaked. So it's not like we have done away with that adventurous type of play within slides. But even slides are a challenge because they're apt for being misused, right? What does a 10-year-old do on a playground with a slide?
You go up the slide.
Absolutely. Yeah. So again, what I'm seeing now at schools is them doing away with slides and having more like an obstacle course type play.
And one of the most brilliant structures I've seen is at Victoria Park. It's, I guess it's like a mushroom.
Oh, that's a cool thing.
And it tilts. What is that? And how did that come along?
So there's a lot of spinners, right? So that one is a overhead spinner, right? That numerous kids get on and you whip around. So it's just another type of play in the playground and making sure that you do incorporate spinning, because we used to put a bat to our head and spin, right? That was the type of spinning that we did. But we still wanted that movement and that action. So now we actually have equipment that we have in the playground that is specifically for that.
So what is your favorite piece of equipment?
That's a good question. I think it's more how playgrounds are designed. What is my favorite?
More like maybe you love a configuration?
Yes. So I love the ability to navigate an entire play structure without touching the ground. And the fact that you have your stepping saucers that go to monkey bars, that go to a climber. I really love that, because I think that when I see kids playing on it, they're really using their imagination. And it doesn't matter whether the equipment is themed, so it doesn't have to be a pirate ship, or it doesn't have to be a tree fort. The sky is the limit, right? They're not limited by someone dictating what that playground is, but they still are thinking about the crocodiles below them, or who knows what their imagination is taking them to. But I love that idea of being able to not touch the ground and be able to navigate. It's kind of like the floor is lava, right?
And when you first arrive at a school like KW Bilingual that had a very antiquated, the principal says to you, well, this is an elementary school. We have kids these ages to these ages, probably up to grade 6 probably use it, but 7 and 8s don't use it so much. How do you go about consulting and beginning that first step of putting together a playground that can fit so many age groups and not alienate maybe the ones at the too far ends? Yeah.
It's very challenging. It's probably one of the hardest things to do, because if you have kindergarten students, they fall into the 2 to 5 age group because of the fact that we have junior kindergarten now. So that means we have to do a 2 to 12 playground, which really means we're incorporating everything for the 2-year-olds and not and the 12-year-olds will lose interest immediately. So I try and challenge people to do a 5 to 12 and a 2 to 5 separately, so that you can have the challenge. You always have to have the challenge to keep the kids interested. What I found with my little ones that aren't so little anymore, but they don't stay little for long. So even though they may be 3, they want to be doing what the 5 or 6-year-old is doing. So if I have to do a 2 to 12, I always try and do some pieces for the 2 to 5-year-olds, but have more equipment for the 5 to 12s.
So I have a technical question now, but when you're making these designs, are you doing this design within software? Are you in like Revit or some playground software? Like what are you building the stuff in?
I am not. So
Okay.
I have an engineering department back in Medicine Hat, Alberta. And so I draw it out, and I have sketch paper, and I draw very crazy little slides. But no, I hand draw all of my designs, and then I send it to them, and then they bring back a 2D. I edit the 2D design if it's perfect, then I'll ask for a 3D rendering that is a color rendering, and then that gets sent on to the client. But I have in the past, when I worked, I had said I had worked for the largest manufacturer in the world. They did have software. But again, I don't necessarily know which post beam is supposed to, how high the post beam has to go, or which railings have to be on a specific climber. So I leave that to the engineers, and I just get to be creative.
That's the dream. I thought I was going to hear about these long hours slaving away at the computer, but I like this way better. No, I mean, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes into this. It's not just a quick little doodle and you send it off.
It's not, but we also have thousands and thousands of playgrounds in our system. So if somebody tells me they want a playground that's like an American Ninja Warrior type play equipment, I can go into the system, search 500 designs, pull those off, and then engineer it specifically for that client. So every single one of them is custom, but I'm certainly reliant on previous designs.
And you have to work at times with other contractors. I remember when Blue Imp was there, we had an excavation company, and I'm not sure who all else, but little problems would arrive that had to be resolved, and you have to all figure out, I guess, together as to what happened. In our case, I think it was water was a bit of an issue. And, we were doing massive infrastructure changes to our whole school. So everything we did had some kind of thing that had to be resolved later. But is that part of it too, where a lot of times it's not just a matter of showing up and laying this playground down and being able to walk away? There's things other contractors you have to work with?
Absolutely. So the design part is the creative part. I am also responsible for the installation. So I work specifically with the installers. I work with the general contractors that may be on site, but I have to manage the entire project. So it is definitely, and everyone always says, oh, this problem arose or whatever. Like you said, Marshall, every single project has some little intricacy to it because it is construction. So if you're building a house, you're going to run into, groundwater or root systems or things like that. It's exactly the same thing when we're digging a hole for a playground.
And sorry, one second. And what's happening with regards to kind of the height and width of playgrounds? Is there a certain height where you say, well, that's about as tall as it gets kind of thing? Like you only go so high but you can go as wide as you want with these?
Well, people are pushing the limits all the time. So we just came out with this huge tower that is, I think, 28 feet tall. It's enclosed as you go up, but it seems like everyone wants to go higher and higher. So it's really just a matter of engineering it so that it is safe. In that case, we would use an enclosed slide to go down. We wouldn't have an open slide. But no, there's really no restriction about height. It would have to be closed off. So the thing that becomes the issue is your fall height. So your surfacing being able to absorb a fall should a child use the equipment incorrectly. But if they're enclosed, then the sky is the limit. Right now, with the current situation, we're seeing sites shrinking, not necessarily having as much budget. So we are seeing them get a little smaller, but then you get the big city projects and they're huge playgrounds.
So when you were in post-secondary studying psychology, what were you imagining for yourself?
I was going to be a teacher.
Okay.
So that was my plan all along, was that I was going to be a teacher and hopefully within a school for children with special needs. I did go and do a lot of volunteer work in classrooms. And I came to the conclusion that I didn't think I'd want a family of my own, that I would just give too much to the kids at the school. And I was concerned that I would not then want to have responsibilities after work with my own children. So that's when I got into corporate and was in the business world.
Are you able to see kind of like a few years ahead as far as playgrounds go, like what's coming on the horizon, things that just they need some tweaking and being resolved? Like I'm talking like things we haven't seen before. Do you have some insight into that?
Well, there's always new products. Right now, the big focus is having more sensory products. So I'm excited. There's a new swing that's coming out that's more like a hammock. where multiple kids can be in this product. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about bringing maybe solar power into play equipment so that there's, lighting or more games that can be interactive. There's a project in the city right now for a green space and trying to incorporate green into your play equipment. So there's all these new different takes on play. So it'll always be evolving.
I feel like when I went and saw the boardwalk, what they set up for the first time, that was like, I'd never seen anything like that. It's a lot of ropes and a lot of climbing, and I haven't seen that anywhere else. Have you seen those around?
For sure. And I did a very large one in Milton, actually. And when you're talking about, is there a height restriction, that net climber was 20 feet tall and there was no constraints around it. They ended up eventually putting constraints around it, but net climbing is definitely very popular. When it first got initiated into the Canadian market, because it's very European, we didn't have the technology behind it, so it didn't have great warranties. It didn't last very long. Well, these now are like aeronautical steel enforced in the center of them. So now there's just so many more opportunities to use rope and different textured items. So it doesn't just have to be steel and plastic any longer. We can incorporate other textures.
And Sarah, what did you think when you first saw it? I remember thinking,
I climbed it.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah.
I just was kind of in awe of it, but I also didn't think it looked as safe as everything else.
It's not. Yeah. That's the whole thing. Like we were talking about earlier about height. It doesn't matter how you enclose. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but as a parent or somebody who lives in a neighborhood, it doesn't matter if you enclose that big high tower. Those kids are going to find a way to climb the outside of it every darn time. The amount of times that I've caught my kids walking on top of railings at a park, and I'm like, well, if I call their name now, they're going to fall. So we just got to kind of wait this out. And, they always come home safe. They do.
Yes. Well, and roofs of playgrounds. We put roofs in because we want to protect the little ones from the solar or from the UV rays. Well, meanwhile, where do the teenagers go? They're on the roof, right? So even when I'm designing a playground, I have to figure that out as to whether or not there's an access point to the roof.
And Laura, have you seen some strange oddball kind of things around? What I mean is at Victoria Park, there's this one swing that's like a giant red chair they sit in that kind of looks like a tongue. And I've seen lots of people taking photos with themselves with it, kind of naughty photos.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
But I've never seen that anywhere else, anywhere. Have you ever seen that chair before?
Yes, I have. So it's just a regular accessible swing. There's a lot going into those types of pieces right now, into swings, because of they have to be a certain weight, and there's all this research that goes into the swing seats themselves. But when you ask if there's odd things, what I oftentimes see is, again, a playground that's been designed from an adult perspective, that when you actually see it in the ground, you think, well, there's no play value here. There's nothing for the children to actually do. I kind of think that about the natural playground at Waterloo Park. If you see that one, there's a bunch of logs sticking straight up, and there's nothing to do with those logs. Maybe tag around them, but I didn't understand that one.
They look cool. I mean, again, I've used that area for photo opportunities, and they definitely look cool. And then the little water feature, which is, I don't think it's been on for quite some time now, but the water feature is great for the littles, but there's a missed opportunity there where it could have been a great space.
Absolutely.
Sorry, whoever made that one.
No, absolutely. And I'll go back and look at playgrounds I did 6 years ago, and there's definitely edits that I want to make, right? So it's always, we're always learning.
Yeah. Can you reflect on that, looking back on all the playgrounds you've worked on, and maybe what you see in your past work and how you might make what kind of changes you're talking about?
Yeah, for sure. I have a lot of playgrounds out there now, and it's really a sense of pride, especially in this community. Like, I've done both school boards, private. I've done work with both cities. I've done the Habitat for Humanities. Like, I've had a lot of great opportunities, and now I'd love to go back and do some tweaks and make better play decisions, and have, I guess maybe at the very beginning, I wasn't doing as many different types of play, or the level of challenge. I talked about that earlier. It's always important to have a beginner, intermediate, and advanced climber. So I maybe wasn't making those decisions when I first started out, that I now am I'm ensuring that there is those levels, so that it ensures that kids come back and play.
I'm really intrigued by this idea of sensory, and that there's certain kids that you're taking into consideration now. I would say that most people, when they see a playground, they have no idea this kind of work is being done. Can you kind of just go a bit more in depth there as we start to wrap up into what is it that that's being done to accommodate that group of kids?
Well, it's not just yourself that wouldn't have information about that, Marshall. Like when I'm putting together a tender, for example, I have to make sure that I'm presenting the playground so that they know how each piece is supposed to, the intended use for that piece, right? So if I'm putting a spinner in, I'm also giving the sensory experience of that spinner, so that it's very clear cut that it's addressing this type of child or this need in that child. So it's very complex in that you have to break it down piece by piece and state why you chose that piece. When I'm doing a school, it's a little different because they know exactly what they want. They're going to tell you, I want this climber and I want this slide. And then you've got to incorporate that in there. You're always encouraging them to make sure that they've got all the different types of play. And but at the end of the day, it's the client's decision as to what they want in their play equipment. But I have beautiful presentations now that really shows how each piece is beneficial to the child.
One of our sponsors for this episode is Tiffin Stews. And it was actually Seema, who owns Tiffin, who introduced me to you in a sense, even though I had already met you previously. Tell me a bit about your connection to Tiffin and Seema.
Absolutely. So I've known Seema for 16 years now. I was very young when I met her. I had been given an opportunity in the corporate world to sell to her. She was a buyer for a very large company, and she took me under her wing and really mentored me as a woman in the business world. And she was in Lowe's, so we were in hardware. So you can imagine how many women were in hardware at that time. But she treated me like an equal from the very beginning. And through the years, she went out on her own first. She left corporate and started her own business first. But I've been fortunate to use her as a mentor and feel confident in my decision to start my own business as a woman entrepreneur.
Thank you so much for taking good care of us at KW Bilingual.
My pleasure.
You must see the look in people's eyes when you meet them for the first time and they ask you maybe at a Christmas party, what is it that you do? And what kind of feedback do you get from people when you tell them what your job is?
Well, it is very much that's so fun. And then I do quickly kind of steer them in the direction that I am in construction. So yes, the design work is very fun, but we did talk about the challenges of construction. So it is a double-edged sword in a way, that you have to be very creative with the design, but you also have to have that project management experience to be able to manage the full process.
Hey all, thanks for meeting us in Bonn Park. Please like, rate, and subscribe to our podcast on the platform that you're listening to. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Bonn Park Podcast. Original music by Alan Lung.